Welcome to today's episode, where I'll be showing you how easy it is to make your very own apple cider and apple syrup. Wild apple trees are probably more common in your area than you think. It's just that you haven't been looking for them. But in the fall, if you're driving down a dirt road, be sure to keep your eyes peeled by the roadside and along the edges of fields. This is where you'll most likely see a wild apple tree. Now, since most people know how to identify an apple, I'm not going to get into detail about how to identify them. So, if you're unsure, I suggest that you do some research. Now, a common misconception about wild apples is that they are bitter tasting, and therefore unpalatable. But wild apples can be just as sweet as an apple from your local grocery store. Now, crab apples, on the other hand, are known for being bitter. But, as you can see, they look quite different from a regular wild apple. Anyway, I found a couple wild apple trees at the edge of this field, one with green apples and the other with red apples. I shook the branches on both trees, causing the ripe apples to fall to the ground, where I collected them into a 5-gallon pail. If the apple had a hole in it, I threw it aside. If the apple had only a bruise or some spots on it, I kept it because it was still a good apple. I rinsed the good apples in a container of water. After that, I cleaned my axe up and I used it to mash the apples into a mush. Once I mashed the apples up, I added the rest of the apples to the mixture and I mashed them in as well. Now, since I don't have access to an expensive apple press, and I'm assuming that you don't either, I needed to devise a cheap and efficient way to extract juice from the apples. So I took a block of wood and I cut it to fit perfectly inside my 5-gallon pail, and I cut it into a bit of a cork shape. I placed a garbage bag over the pail to keep dirt from getting into the apple mash. And next comes the cork that I just made. Now all that is needed is a good steady weight to press down on the cork. And so I stood on top. Now I strongly recommend having something to hang on to when you do this because, well, it's pretty easy to fall off and hurt yourself. After I've stomped on the cork for about a minute or so, it was time to drain the juice. Holding the cork in place, I held the bucket upside down and let the juice drain into a pot. From a 5-gallon pail of apples, I was able to extract 1 pitcher of juice, which equaled about 2.5 liters. Now I mashed a second batch of apples into a finer mush, and I was able to get about 3 liters out of that batch. I strained the juice to remove any leftover apple chunks. Then I put the juice onto the stove. As you can see here, the moment the juice comes to a boil, there's a thick froth that forms on the surface. This froth is all the impurities rising to the surface. Take a mesh strainer and scoop this froth off the top. Keep scooping until the froth is gone. You can now remove the pot from the burner. Pour it into a pitcher and allow it to cool. The remaining impurities will settle in the bottom of the pitcher, and you can see them settled down in the bottom already, in the bottom inch of the pitcher there. Keep your cider in the fridge until you're ready to heat it up for a hot mug of homemade apple cider. Don't forget to throw in a cinnamon stick. Here's a preview of the next episode, where I show you how to turn your apple cider into apple syrup. You'll be surprised how easy it is to do. Now, if you liked today's episode, anything involving the outdoors or wild edibles, please feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching.